Hare Krishna. My name is Vaikuntha Das. I first went to the temple in 1971 in New York, and after some years of regularly attending temples on the East Coast, I moved to San Diego, California in 1978 and became a brahmachari, serving there for 24 years, later moving to Alachua, Florida, and then to Mayapur, India, following our children's path of education in Krishnaized schools and ultimately in Gurukula in Mayapur. So just now I'm visiting Bangalore, and it's very wonderful after here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Can Varnashrama also be properly practiced in the modern cities of today?
I'm no expert. Let me begin by saying I'm no expert on Varnashram. However, I would say it certainly can. The modern cities may not be very well suited in their present state for Varnashram, but Varna and Ashram really are four occupational and four spiritual divisions of life. And ultimately they're present everywhere in society, right? At least the occupational divisions. They may not be in their pure state, but they're present anyway. We have intellectuals, we have administrators, isn't it? We have merchants, we have farmers,
Yes.
we have laborers. This is all going on.
Yeah.
It needs to be properly guided according to Lord Krishna's instructions. How people, just like he says, by worship of the Lord, a man can, by the performance of his own duties, become perfect, right?
Yes.
So if Krishna consciousness is added and people can learn to perform their varnas in a Krishna-centered state of mind, whether you're in the city or in the country. There were cities when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita where he says this system is created by me,
Yeah.
according to the three modes of nature and the four qualities like that. So I would say yes.
Yes. Thank you. And so far within ISKCON, we have introduced only the Brahmana Varna. How ISKCON can introduce other Varnas like Kshatriya, Vaisya and Shudra, if at all they should be introduced?
Through education. That's one of the... I moved to Mayapur in 2010. My family moved to Mayapur. I go back and forth because I work. Primarily, we stayed there because my son, after several months in Mayapur, became attracted to attending the Bhaktivedanta Gurukula there. Bhaktivedanta Gurukula has been going on for over 40 years in one form or another in Mayapur, and they do emphasize Brahminical as well as Kshatriya and Vaishya training. I mean, they're gradually expanding training in Kshatriya and Vaishya, and this is done by observing the natural qualities of a boy and then giving him more training and more opportunities for service within the areas where he has a natural aptitude. So you'll see some boys will be growing things. The school is 80% self-sufficient. They grow their own food, they have their own goshala. Some boys even market the vegetables and things that they grow to devotees like that. So through education is how this would have to come about, because you know, one of the problems in America when Prabhupada started farms was that very few devotees were farmers. And it's not easy to become a self-sufficient agrarian farmer, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're trained in that from your youth, then it becomes very natural. So I would say establishment of Varnashram in ISKCON has a very strong connection with establishment of Gurukula.
Gurukula, correct. So in that context, how should ISKCON promote education for women within this movement? Education for women in this moment?
Yeah, well, that's a difficult question. You know, you have different cultures around the world, and in different cultures you have different social norms. My opinion is that Srila Prabhupada was very sensitive to that. Although he was presenting pure Krishna consciousness, sometimes in different areas, according to his observations of how the cultures were conducted, he conducted some of the activities, especially these gender issues, according to the local culture. For instance, in America, he saw that boys and girls mingled everywhere all the time. So he created a Brahmacharini ashram. When his disciple Brahmananda Maharaj allowed a girl to stay over at the temple in Kenya, just following through with what we normally did in America, it created a social uproar because she had stayed outside of her father's house. How would she get married? When the news came to Prabhupada, he instructed him not to do that in an Indian society in Kenya because the culture is different. Yes. So in education, I don't think we can really make one blanket policy like that because ISKCON is going on in many different cultures simultaneously. And I don't personally think that would be so wise. I know Prabhupada often indicated that a lot of a girl's education would actually take place in the home,
Yes.
right? It's a very good environment to learn devotional qualities and skills that would enable a woman to be a perfect partner for a devotee husband, to raise a family, to actually help the children through all of their different stages of life. So there's a lot to be said for that. However, I don't think you can make one blanket policy for the whole world immediately.
Correct. Thank you, Prabhu. So, then this is about cows. How important are cows in the lives of ISKCON devotees? What do we mean by cow culture?
Again, I'm not very knowledgeable. Since I've been staying more in Mayapur, it's very nice. I have to say, honestly, we drink a lot more milk than we did in the West because we have Mr. Ghosh, a nice milkman who milks his cows every morning and comes by with fresh milk. We boil it 3 times and use it throughout the day. And the milk is very pure. And one can appreciate Prabhupada's statement about by drinking nice cow's milk, it creates finer tissues in the brain to understand Krishna consciousness, right? So it's actually very important. Many yagyas are performed, the ghee is used, yogurt, all the products of the cow we understand are auspicious. In America, milk, it's difficult because it's coming from large agro-business dairies. Cows are sold off for slaughter when they stop giving milk. So this will tie into one of your later questions. I noticed there's something about veganism, but again, in different cultures, when Prabhupada asked us to start self-sufficient agrarian communities in America in the 1970s and late 60s for that matter, these would have become natural vehicles for the development of our ashram communities, right? We didn't get there very quickly, but still the goal is there. And when you have cows that are being properly protected from the time they're born till the time they naturally die, when you have communities that trade cows for bona fide purposes, and you have a demand for oxen to plow the land, to pull carts, these sort of things. In other words, when you actually create an agrarian community, and ideally more than one community where there's interactions, and you start to create a demand for oxen, then I think we can begin to talk about cow protection. Because otherwise, we can have a community where we protect cows and it's nice, but without showing the utility of the cow and the bull, then it's more show than it is. We're not going to convince the vast materialistic society the value of the cow without showing the value of the bull and the oxen.
Thank you, Prabhu. How important are villages and why is ISKCON much less involved with village development?
With village development?
Yeah.
Well, again, I grew up in America, so villages, I'm learning about staying in India and visiting other countries. Villages are very important. Extended family is very important. I mean, my observation as an American spending a larger amount of time overseas is that you start to appreciate the traditional lifestyle much more. America got off on this idea that everyone should just have their nuclear family. When your parents get old, you put them in an old folks home. As soon as your children turn 18, you send them out. They have to find their own way in life. It's insane, actually. Like you see in India, like I mentioned, our milkman. So after about 3 years, now his son brings the milk because he's getting elderly. So his son is about 18, 19. He's just stepped into a business that's been going for generations. He's known how to do it since he was a little boy. He does it nicely. He's happy doing it. He'll be able to raise a family, taking care of the same cows and their descendants that his parents and grandparents did.
Yes.
Right? So villages gives this opportunity. You have village lifestyle, which is very, very self-sustaining. It can go on for thousands of years.
Yeah. Why is Varnashrama considered by some devotees as most important and by others as not very much relevant in our present social context?
Well, again, I think ISKCON is a big movement, and there are variations of lifestyles around the world.
Yeah.
My understanding is that Srila Prabhupada, towards the end of his mission, stated that he felt that his mission was incomplete because he hadn't I was just reading the quote the other day. He said he's feeling that his mission was incomplete, and the devotee said, because you haven't finished Bhagavatam, Prabhupada. He said, no, because I haven't introduced Varnashram, right? So Srila Prabhupada understood that, in my opinion, as the movement expands, when you are going to organize larger groups of people beyond just Brahmins running around teaching and distributing books and going on Harinam, worshipping deities, doing yajnas, that you actually need a system to actually organize a society. And the reality is that when you have a society which meets the needs of the individuals who are in the society, then we can make progress. In other words, we need Varnashram creates culture, and that culture actually sustains us, right? When you have a culture which sustains you emotionally, mentally, and engages you physically, right? Then you can be very peaceful. You can actually experience a type of happiness in this world doing what you do for Krishna, right? Many of us, we join Krishna consciousness because of the philosophical understanding, but oftentimes because we don't have the cultural support, sometimes we will fall away, or we may just temporarily fall away. In other words, sometimes just the philosophical conviction is not enough because our needs on other aspects of our being are not being met, like the emotional, the intellectual, etc. So Varnashram really gives a complete package. You actually have a devotional culture, a devotional lifestyle, a God-centered existence, which actually supports all of the different members according to their own particular situation within the modes of nature, the type of body we have, the type of mentality we have, the type of intellect we have. So Varnashram will actually create a society that will sustain aspiring Vaishnavas in their devotional service.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. So one last question, Prabhu. It's somewhat related to village again. So can you comment on the statement that Vedic culture is primarily meant to be an agrarian culture?
Yeah, again, I'm not at all expert on these things, but generally, if you look, most people would live, a larger proportion of the people would live in the country, and there, even in Krishna's time, there were cities. I mean, Dwarka was a big city, Hastinapur, big cities are there, but generally, the way life is carried on, most people live in villages and in the country, and some people live in cities, right? So the modern thing is industry. And the idea of industry, Prabhupada says, everyone comes and works, and a few people are making a lot of money, and a lot of people are working for their simple life, simple living and high thinking. And in the cities, tends to be a more degrading lifestyle, right? So Varnashram naturally lends itself to a more natural lifestyle, because if we, like Prabhupada kind of gave that motto, right? Simple living and high thinking, right? So that simplicity of life in an agrarian setting is very, very beneficial, right? But city life is also there, right? In Krishna consciousness. So I wouldn't see Varnashram only in the context of agrarian, right?
Yes.
Because Kshatriyas live in cities. They have capital cities, right? Brahmins act as teachers in schools and ministers. So it's all there. You know, Krishna gives a perfect system that can really be applied anywhere and everywhere. And if we learn to apply it, then I think it will help our movement and it'll help the world.
Two more comments we would like to take, Prabhu, on two statements. One statement is you are mentioning about unfulfilled mission of Srila Prabhupada. So you can comment anything about 50% of his mission is left because Varnashram is not established. And second thing is how can ISKCON leaders, present ISKCON leaders, can be motivated or inspired to take up this more thoroughly or more forward? Any comments, please?
Well, it's a very big topic of discussion, and you know, like I heard last year that some leaders in America felt that Varnashram wasn't very relevant to our preaching at this time in America, and I was surprised by that just because of being aware of the quotations that you mentioned. I think, again, it's a big movement, it's all over the world, but I think because Prabhupada's instructions are there, even if we don't understand something ourselves, it's important that we study it and we get together with those who understand it more and we really try to make a plan of how to implement it within ISKCON, to what degree we can, because I don't think any of Prabhupada's instructions should be neglected. There's a famous letter that Satsvarup Maharaj wrote to Srila Prabhupada after book distribution had become the preeminent form of preaching Krishna consciousness in the West. And prior to that, Harinam Sankirtan was the prominent method of preaching Krishna consciousness in the West. So he said, Srila Prabhupada, now you're stressing book distribution. Does this mean that Harinam is no longer so important? Something to that effect. And Prabhupada wrote back and he said, because I stress one thing, it doesn't mean that something else I've stressed is no longer important. Everything is important, right? Because, again, we all have different natures. Like Lord Krishna says, I quoted it earlier, by worship of the Lord, a person can, by the performance of their own duties, become perfect, right?
Yeah.
So we all have something to contribute to the Krishna consciousness movement. We all have some ability, we have some nature, we have some inclination of what to do, right? We have some enthusiasm. Just like the exercise Mahatma Prabhu did earlier here in the temple room. He had devotees think about what they really like to do, and then how they could do that for Krishna, right? And so many suggestions came up which would make this yatra very, very empowered, because people would be taking responsibility for very different areas of development of spreading of Krishna consciousness here in Bangalore, right? So we have to see it like that everyone would have something to contribute, and by encouraging all the different areas of service that Srila Prabhupada wanted, and Varnashram really, it covers all of that, because it covers the preaching, it covers the deity worship, it covers the cooking, it covers the farming, it covers the cow protection, it covers the banking, it covers the growing food, it covers administrating, protecting. What doesn't it cover, right?
Yes.
So why would we want to, in the long term, I mean obviously in the beginning you take what's there and you use it, Yukta Vairagya, but in the long term, why wouldn't we want to implement Krishna's system, right?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't it be the perfect system for Krishna's devotees? That's all I have to say.